Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Kalamata, Greece on May 21st, 2026. I'm very pleased to be joined again on Reason to Resist by our good friend Laith Marouf, Executive Director from Free Palestine TV, who's just returned to his humble abode from reporting in the field. Thank you very much for joining us again today, Laith.
Great to be with you, Dimitri. Thank you for having me.
So, Laith, I'd like to start with the state of the so-called negotiations between Iran and the Trump regime. On Monday, Trump claimed that he had decided to delay an attack on Iran that was scheduled to begin on Tuesday, but that he had decided not to do so because various Arab autocrats, including the Saudi Crown Prince, had asked him to delay the attack because they felt that a deal was in the offing and was likely to be concluded in the next couple of days. And here, of course, I'm sure you've seen it, Laith, is the loquacious Truth Social post in which Trump pontificated about how much he respects these Arab autocrats, takes their advice seriously, and in deference to them and out of great respect, he was going to delay his attack for a couple of days. Now, as you probably also know, Laith, almost immediately sources from several Gulf autocracies told the Wall Street Journal that they were not even aware of Trump's intention to attack Iran on Tuesday. So what do you make of all these developments, Laith? Who's telling the truth? And do you attach any credence to Trump's claims?
Yeah, I mean, look, the question about who's telling the truth is which Trump is telling the truth, because the last time we heard about these monarchs in the Arabian Peninsula is that they kiss his behind and that they have to kiss his behind. Now he's saying he has all this respect for them and listens to them. So was the kissing of the behind that nice and that good? I don't know. You know, maybe did they get him to wash his behind with a bidet, or is he just using wipes as usual? Those are all like questions that open up. You know,
this is terrible. I'm trying to prevent these images from popping into my head. The police continue. Yes. He was planning to attack Iran. Let's put aside for a second these autocrats. But what do you make of the claim he was planning to attack Iran, and that they're so close to a deal he thought it was better to wait?
Well, it's clear that the United States is trying to find ways to attack Iran. It is also trying to find ways to pressure Iran to accept the deal in the terms of the United States. Part of that was the trip of Trump to China. And what he got is actually nothing. I got zero. And in fact, clearly China and Russia are even more behind Iran than before the war. They've seen how Iran performed valiantly and was able to inflict damage on the American empire and an American military power, unlike any other opponent of the United States since the end of World War II. Remember, every war that the United States fought, even the ones that it lost in Vietnam, in Iraq, and Afghanistan, were on the enemy's territory. For the first time, we saw an opponent of the United States, making the war be fought on the territories of imperial domains like the Gulf states, the Zionist colony, the seas, and the United States wasn't able to confine the damage and the war to its opponent. So this is huge changes in battle scenes, and it's unprecedented. So I think right now what we're seeing is that the United States is still trying to find ways that it can maybe manipulate or pressure Iran into accepting deals that are not going to be to its benefit and could open the door for new wars later on. And Iran is steadfast in its position. It has won this war and is expecting that the United States will have to change its conditions to having normal relations with Iran from the conditions that existed prior to this war. So will the US attack Iran? it is hard to actually come to conclusions from just looking at the realities on the ground, because, if the actors in the United States and Israel were rational, just pure capitalist or pure imperialists, they wouldn't have allowed for the destruction of their own assets in the Gulf. They wouldn't have allowed for the destruction of world economies and trade. But because they're driven by an ideology, which is Zionism, Jewish supremacy, it is sometimes very clear that they are making irrational decisions. So will the United States attack Iran again? Rationally, the answer would be no, because the US doesn't have any more means to attack Iran except a nuclear weapon, and the world will not accept that. And so the rational answer is no, but again, there's ideology playing at hand, and that's the unpredictable factor.
So, hot on the heels of this controversy, Trump and the Gulf autocrats contradicting each other, Trump's favorite mouthpiece in the corporate media, I imagine he's his favorite, Barak David, put out another article in Axios claiming that a new Iran peace proposal had triggered a tense Trump-Netanyahu call. So this article was published late last night, and in the body of the article, he says that Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt have been working over the last several days to refine a proposal. I think this is an Iranian proposal to bridge the gaps. Three sources say, of course, they're not identified. And he says, according to two Arab officials and an Israeli source, Qatar recently presented the U.S. and Iran with a new draft. A fourth said there was no separate Qatari draft, blah, blah, blah. And then in the middle of the page says the goal of the new effort is to get more tangible commitments from the Iranians over steps regarding their nuclear program, and more specifics from the U.S. as to how frozen Iranian funds will be gradually released, an Arab official said. And all three sources stress it's unclear whether the Iranians will agree to the new draft or shift their position significantly. And then at the bottom, for color, we are told that Trump told Netanyahu that the mediators were working on a letter of intent that both the U.S. and Iran would sign to formally end the war and launch a 30-day period of negotiations on issues like Iran's nuclear program and open the Strait of Hormuz. And two Israeli sources said that the two leaders were in disagreement about the way forward, while the U.S. source briefed on the call said, quote, Bibi's hair was on fire after the call, close quote. What's your response to this report, Laith?
Well, we've seen a lot of attempts to, in the media over the last few days, to kind of confuse things in the mind of the audience, because much of the audience in the West is sick and tired of what Israel is doing and what the United States is doing to support Israel. And clearly, Trump, his inner circle is the same inner circle as Netanyahu. I don't think there is a divergence of opinions between Trump and Netanyahu. Trump himself probably doesn't even have the mental faculties to deal with these situations, the complex situations of negotiations with Iran. And there's a lot of things that the Epstein class holds on Trump. So I doubt that there is any fight between Trump and Netanyahu. This is all maybe to lift some of the pressure that is building up inside the United States on Trump. We saw that whole battle with the elections in Kentucky with Congressman Macy, and how it's damaging deeply the MAGA movement, and the split is widening deeper and deeper. So I think we can take this article within that context. The issue is there isn't much that Iran is willing to give to the United States. Iran had agreed and signed on to a nuclear deal before this war, and it was Trump that threw that deal in the garbage and decided to take military actions in order to better the position of the United States within whatever agreement it signs with Iran to force Iran to give more concessions. And what ended up happening in the military battle is that Iran won. So Iran would be expecting what Trump would have expected if he won the war. So now Iran is refusing to agree to the same points it signed on to with the nuclear deal, and is wanting concessions from the United States as the victor in this battle. So I think this is the reality on the ground, and anything that we read from Barak Ravid, who's a Mossad agent, should be always counted as propaganda.
Right. So for those of our audience members who don't know the background of this character, he worked for years in Unit 8200, an intelligence gathering arm of the Israeli military. My theory about this, which is consistent with yours, Laith, and I highlight Ravid, but you can find a lot of characters in the corporate media in the West who are doing this. They're lending credence to Trump's incessant claims that we're just on the verge of a peace deal. So, and I'm going to just put up on the screen here the headline from another Axios article authored by Ravid on April 17th, okay? And he lent credence to Trump's claim at that time that there was going to be, in a day or two, an Iran deal. That was over a month ago. And the problem I think that Trump has, of course, is that with each passing day, upward pressure on the price of oil increases. And every time the market is told that they're on the verge of a peace deal, the price of oil tends to recede. And so I think Trump and the corporate media are working hand in hand to try to suppress the price of oil. They keep putting out these stories that they're just around the corner, peace deal's just around the corner, price comes down, because he needs time. And the time I think he's hoping will be on his side, that this blockade of Iranian ports is ultimately going to cause Iran to capitulate. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you think that's what's going on here? And do you think there's any real prospect of Iran capitulating because of the blockade on its ports?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the prices of oil play a lot, and the inner circle of Trump that is manipulating the markets, not only to keep the price of oil down, but also to enrich themselves. We see all those investments that are happening minutes usually before Trump says something, or minutes after he says something, the inside trading that is happening, and the blanket, decision by the IRS to give amnesty to Trump and his family for perpetuity for any financial crimes that they may have been committed is clear example of that reality. So I think there's those two parts. On the one hand, you have the attempted manipulation of the oil prices. The other is manipulation of markets in general for inside trading within the Trump inner circle. The other thing that is causing Trump to do this, constantly bring up that there will be some peace agreement or some ceasefire, is to extend the period of time that Israel has to attack Lebanon. There had one of the conditions of Iran to enter negotiations with the United States is that there will be a ceasefire in Lebanon. The Israelis are refusing to implement a ceasefire in Lebanon because they have yet to have any victories in the battlefield. And if there's a ceasefire without any permanent changes on the ground in Lebanon, all the losses of equipment and men and credibility that Israel has faced over the last 2.5, 3 months since the beginning of this war, it will be for nothing. So I think, in my mind, actually, the issue of the ceasefire in Lebanon and giving more time for Israel to achieve some of its goals is the main reason that Trump keeps on extending these negotiations with Iran.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely want to come back to the battlefield conditions in Lebanon in a few minutes. Before we get there, I wanted to show you an announcement made today by the Iranian military. They've set up a new authority, the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, and they have defined the authority's zone of control in the Strait of Hormuz, and you can see it in the map here. By the way, this is consistent with a map that they published earlier this month. It's almost precisely the same, but this time they're stating that this is their definitive position, and it's being backed up by the creation of a new agency to control the Strait of Hormuz. And as you can see there, Laith, this on the right side, the lower right-hand corner, that red line places the Emirati port of Fujairah inside the zone of control. And that is the port that has enabled the Emirates to circumvent the Strait of Hormuz with some oil exports during the past 2 months or so, 2.5 months. And this would be a crushing blow were this actually to be the zone of control that Iran maintains going forward indefinitely over the strait. This would be a crushing blow to the United Arab Emirates. Do you think there's any realistic prospect of the Trump regime agreeing to this, or alternatively of the the Islamic Republic giving it up?
I think, talk and signing documents and so on in the world that we live in today is irrelevant. What matters is force. And so can Iran actually make sure this zone is under its control? Yes. Can the Emiratis break the siege on Fujairah by the Iranians? No. Can the United States break the control of Iran over the Hormuz and all of these waters and coastlines? No. So it is de facto fact. It's de facto, right? And the thing that I think we should put into context here, if you notice that coast on the Gulf of Oman, the Emirati coast there, is all now under this control of Iran. So there will be no ability of the Emirates to build a different port or something. So that zone of control extends all the way to the border of Oman. This is one thing. The other thing that it's clear is that the Iranians said if they are attacked again, and if the Emiratis are involved in such attack, that they will occupy the coast of the Emirates. They may end basically the existence of the state of the United Arab Emirates. And they are not joking when they say something like this. The Emirates doesn't have the ability to defend itself if Iran decides, especially with the absence of American troops on the ground to defend them or nearby to defend them if that happens.
Right. Now, the Iranian military put out another warning. That first document I just showed you wasn't a warning, it was just a declaration. But they put out a warning as well in the last day or two. And their warning was that they will extend the conflict beyond the region. I'm sure that they're referring here to West Asia, if the US and Israel resume attacks. Now, Laith, you were recently in the Eastern Mediterranean. I think you were in Italy, you were in Greece. I can't recall if you also visited Cyprus. In your opinion, Laith, if Iran carries out this, well, first of all, do you agree that Iran has the capability to carry out this threat, given the range of its missiles? And if so, what do you think its prime targets are going to be outside the region?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't visit Cyprus, but I was in Crete and I was in Italy, and I could see obviously all the military deployments that are there. I watched the documentary that you also did on Soda base in Crete, and during the 40 somewhat days of direct war with Iran, the Iranian armed forces were able to destroy all the airfields and American bases in Western Asia, as well as inside the Zionist colony. And we saw the imperialist coalition using the airstrips in Cyprus, in Greece, in Hungary, in Turkey, in Djibouti, in Diego Garcia, to bombard Iran. And as the costs and of the refueling jets with their multiple attacks on these refuelers on the ground became higher and higher, we saw the United States resolve to using its long-range strategic bombers taking off from its territory in North America to bomb Iran. And this is not non-sustainable, right? In general, you can't bombard all the way from the US, Iran. So, Iran sent one time a missile or a drone that hit the base in Cyprus. Iran denied it was it, but everybody knew that the base in Cyprus was hit. And that was a hint to the anyone who is aiding the United States outside Western Asia that you could be a target. And that caused all the NATO alliance to send all these ships to the coast between Lebanon and Cyprus, mainly ships that have air defenses, all to protect the NATO bases in Cyprus and west, even more west. And so in a situation where there is a return to hostilities with Iran, Iran has no choice this time but to attack the bases in Djibouti, Diego Garcia, Cyprus, Turkey, Greece, and further in East Europe to take away the possibility of the United States bombing it, except with long-range bombers. And this is very logical. And I think, given the alliance that we saw happening between the Zionist, Cyprus, and Greece, and again, that was something that you filmed, those meetings that happened between the governments there about their military alliance, about their fight against the axis of resistance. I think it is about time that the government of Cyprus and the government of Greece specifically are taught a lesson. And having Iran attack those bases will not only humiliate these comprador elite in those countries, but it may help the people of Cyprus and the people of Greece that disagree with how their governments are participating in genocides and wars to actually rise up. You see, I think it's time for this to happen. And I don't know how much the elite in these countries are willing to risk their whole nations for the sake of the Zionists, but if Germany and the UK are willing to destroy their own credibility to support Zionism, I don't know how more humiliating of themselves they'll be, the elite in Greece and Cyprus.
Yeah, I have to think that the British military base in Akrotiri, Cyprus, is going to be a prime target. They've just shipped huge amounts of weaponry to Israel throughout not just the war in Iran, but the genocide. Their planes have been used. Planes from that base have been used, I believe, to bomb Yemen. The British have been sending spy flights over Gaza from Akrotiri, sharing intelligence with the Israelis as they were mass murdering Palestinian civilians. Greece allowed the Israelis to use Greek airspace to practice bombing runs on Iran. And as you know from your visit to Suda Bay on the island of Crete, the Americans have a major presence there, which has almost certainly been facilitating attacks on Iran. Before we move on from the subject, I just do want to show with our audience, and you may have seen this, Laith, just this past weekend, Greeks of conscience came out in force in Suda Bay to demand the departure of the Americans and NATO from that facility. I just want to share a little bit of that footage with the audience. So local organizers told me there were well over 1,000 people there. And Chania, where that protest began, it's not a big place. So I think more and more Greeks and Cypriots are realizing that we are being endangered by our government's deep complicity with the genocidal entity. With that, Laith, I'd like to turn to Lebanon. And the news that's coming out of the battlefield in southern Lebanon and northern occupied Palestine is really quite compelling. The level of casualties that are being inflicted on the Israelis is seems to be mounting. I just want to share one particular piece of news, and that is that this character, Colonel Meir Biderman, was seriously wounded in South Lebanon, I believe by a roadside bomb. And he is the commander of the Notorious 401st Armoured Brigade, whose members murdered Hind Rajab and her family, and 2 paramedics who came to save them. And they also stormed Al-Shifa Hospital and terrorized Rafah. So that is quite a blow. Apparently, this terrorist is fighting for his life. It's not clear whether he'll survive. But could you just talk to us more broadly, not just about this particular attack, but what is happening in South Lebanon and northern occupied Palestine, and how the resistance is managing to inflict so much casualties on these criminals?
Yeah, like just for our audience, a brigade is around 3,000 soldiers. So this man was in charge of the central sector of the war zone in the south of Lebanon. So, and he's not the only commander or officer that was hunted this way and targeted by Hezbollah. Other officers were of lower ranks. We saw multiple videos of FPVs hitting command and control vehicles, APCs that have all those antennas and so on, that are controlling the battlefield and the movement of their troops, and whatever officers were in those APCs were definitely dead or injured. Israelis didn't admit their name, but this is the highest ranking admittance right now. There was also attacks on command and control vehicles and locations inside occupied Palestine over the last few days. We saw Hezbollah using those FPVs with unusually long fiber optic cables, flying them into occupied Palestine and hitting houses where the Israeli soldiers are hiding. By the way, the frontline colonies in occupied Palestine are considered military zones. You can't just purchase, if you're an Israeli, a house in one of these frontline villages. Similarly, in the Golan Heights, you have to be a member of the armed forces and or intelligence agencies to be a resident of these frontline colonies. So they are empty right now, these colonies, of the families of these soldiers and so forth. But these soldiers have left the bases around these colonies because they become easy targets, those spaces, and have moved into residential homes in those colonies, using them as their command bases, and Hezbollah is hunting them inside those colonies. So this shows us how much advanced intelligence gathering and surveillance the Hezbollah is doing, and being able to pinpoint where the locations of these officers are in these colonies and or inside occupied parts of Lebanon. You know, those we saw over the last 24 hours release of those videos of attacks on Iron Dome batteries inside occupied Palestine. We saw a video of a montage that Hezbollah did of all its attacks on a temporary Israeli base inside Lebanon, in Al-Bayada on the coast line. That video showed how the FPVs were going through windows of the temporary command center, hitting equipment like the advanced cameras and the communication arrays, and eventually how the Israeli soldiers abandoned this temporary base, and then one FPV coming to take down the Israeli flag that was put up on top of this building in Al Bayada. So the efficiency of Hezbollah's use of the FPVs is unprecedented, I think, in any battlefield. And according to the admittance of the Israelis themselves, the use of these FPVs have limited the movement of Israeli soldiers. 80% of all of their operations had to be canceled. And they have orders right now not to move during daylight. That's limiting all their abilities. And finally, I would say when we're talking about countermeasures that the Israelis have been trying to implement against the FPVs, the only thing that they came up with is fishing nets. And Israeli soldiers are fundraising online to buy their own fishing nets to put them on top of the houses in Lebanon that they're occupying. But when they do that, it's making those houses easily recognizable. So here's you have Israeli soldiers trying to hide in an occupied village in Lebanon, and making it easier for Hezbollah to know which house they're in by when they put these nets on top of the house. And then Hezbollah doesn't need to use an FPV to attack that house anymore. It just can throw a suicide drone and or missiles on it, and it's a done deal. So the measures that the Israelis are attempting to use to solve this problem with the FPVs is causing them even more problems.
Now, 5 days ago, Laith, the Trump regime announced that the so-called ceasefire in Lebanon had been extended by 45 days. I mean, I just fell off my chair when I saw this. What are they talking about? I mean, as we've covered on this program, the Lebanese resistance is now mounting 25 to 30 military operations a day. We just saw one of the casualties that the Israelis have suffered of many. So look, any rational human being having even a passing familiarity with the facts knows there isn't really a ceasefire, nothing that could reasonably be called a ceasefire in Lebanon. But why do you think, what do you think is going on here from the perspective of the Lebanese government? Like, why is the Lebanese government pretending that there is a ceasefire? And is there any credence to these reports that have accompanied this announcement that they've made great progress, the Lebanese government and the Israelis, in reaching some sort of peace deal?
Yeah, well, the Lebanese government cannot take any decisions without Master in the White House telling them. Obviously, they're not negotiating anything. They're just waiting to sign on the dotted line as Master tells them. The reason we see this claim of extension of the ceasefire for another 45 days is because the Israelis need to achieve some of their goals, their military goals in Lebanon, and they haven't been able to achieve any of their goals. And because the Lebanese collaborationist government cannot offer anything to the Israelis in terms of attacking Hezbollah or what have you, those attempts to have the Lebanese military attack Hezbollah or disarm it are unrealistic. It's not going to happen. So we see the Lebanese government basically telling the Israelis, go ahead and kill more of Hezbollah, destroy more of the Shia villages, displace more of the population, impoverish them more. Maybe I can help you at the end of it if you weaken them enough. That's literally what's happening. And this nefarious use of language where genocide becomes ceasefire, where invasion becomes liberation, where genocide, war crimes become normal warfare, and resistance is terrorism. This is, the norm. Language has almost lost its meaning. Especially, whenever we hear these officials in the United States and or in Israel use language, we almost want to erase language. It's so ridiculous, and it's the conditions on the ground tell us that Hezbollah is winning. The Israelis are not going to achieve anything. They're just going to continue killing civilians, destroying infrastructure. The number of Lebanese civilians in the last 2.5 months since the beginning restart of this war is around 3,000 martyrs and around 10,000 injured. But when we look at the Israeli numbers, they admit that there is around 1,500 Israeli casualties. They don't tell us how many Israeli soldiers dead and how many of them injured, but that's, 1,500 Israeli soldiers dead or injured. Even if we believe that number, although in my mind it's 10 times that, it is clear that they have not been able to kill 1,500 Hezbollah fighters. They have been able to, kill 3,000 civilians, but Hezbollah has lower casualties as a fighting force than that of the Israelis.
Do you sense that an ignominious withdrawal is in the offing, another one from South Lebanon by the terrorist entity, or you think is your sense that this is going to take several more months of bloodshed to accomplish the expulsion of the Israelis from South Lebanon? I know that's a hard question to answer, Laith. I mean, just so you're not on the front line, and even people who are on the front line, probably would be struggling to answer that question. But what's your best sense as to the state of the battle at this stage?
Overall, the axis of resistance had won this war, whether it's in Iran and or what's happening right now in Lebanon. Hezbollah has won. If there was a rational enemy, if the command of the Israeli military was not bound by the political orders of the establishment, they would have abandoned South Lebanon from long ago. Their losses are huge. The numbers of tanks that they lost is nearing now almost 350. This is above and beyond the APCs and the bulldozers and Humvees. So these are all huge losses that are not justified by the territorial gain or the military casualties of the enemy. Hezbollah's military casualties are low this time because they've taking a different tactic in this battle than the one in the 66-day war. I think just like with the war on Iran, it's impossible to calculate things rationally in terms of the future prospects, because ideology is a driver behind it. I believe in general, since October 7th, since the genocide on Gaza started and the Al-Aqsa flood started, I saw that as this is going to be the last war in the region, and that this war will not end except with either the total collapse of American hegemony in Western Asia and the collapse of the Zionist colony, or the total genocide of Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims in Western Asia through a nuclear holocaust. There's no third option. The people in the region here will not accept another 10 years of peace, then war again, then 10 years of peace, and then war again. This is not going to happen again. We don't want to live this another generation. So I see it as the last war, and that means that this will continue until either of those outcomes happens in different forms and shapes.
I must say I agree with your assessment, as horrifying as that is. In any case, not the victory of the resistance, of course. That's not what's horrifying. It's the bloodshed that will be required to achieve it, and the possibility that these lunatics will resort to nuclear weapons. In any case, Laith, always a great pleasure talking to you. Stay safe out there. Please tell our audience where they can find your work and how they can support Free Palestine TV.
You can go to freepalestine.video, our website, and from there you can go find all our social network accounts. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Telegram, X, all of those and more. And please donate. We're 100% dependent on our viewers. If you like our content, you can donate on the website. Again, freepalestine.video is the website. Thank you, Dimitri, for having me.
Thank you, and we're signing off. Peace out from Beirut and Kalamata.